Okay, I'm going to have you imagine lying on their back. You can bolster their knees, right? And they're coming in with a shoulder. This is what happened today. Coming in with the shoulder, but you could see from the beginning, he's got a shoulder problem, but not only that, this shoulder is way lower than the other. Interesting, right? And you've seen this, I'm sure. Maybe you see it in yourself. So this is the problem shoulder, right? This is the one that's lower. So I have him lie on his back. And I make sure the head and the neck get supported. I check on how tense the neck might be. I did not have them move his eyes, but usually I could say, just sink your eyeballs into deep pools of water. That's often what I say to just quiet people's jaws, quiet people's necks, and get them breathing. Can they just quiet those eyeballs and think of their eyeballs sinking back? No movement at all. Then I suggest that the eyeballs could be floating. They could float up, they could float down, they could float to the right, they could float to the left. And if we can get them there doing that in their imagination, you'll see tonus of the jaw, tonus of the neck, all quieting, because the eyes are very connected to the neck. You all know that from watching at the computer, from watching television. Your head follows your eyes all the time. Now, if you look with your eyes, your head will follow. Some people just look and their eyes aren't really looking. They turn their head, but their eyes aren't really looking. So that's curious too, but that's something else, okay? So this man came in and I supported both his elbows as he was lying there. So I put a little towel, a little support underneath both of his arms. So now his pecs aren't in their normal way being stretched when they lie down. They're supported. The shoulders are coming forward. So I'm bringing the shoulders to the sternum so the pecs don't have to feel a stretch. I do that on both arms. I'm watching him breathe. He's not breathing. So I go down to his feet and I start working with his feet. I'm always watching that right arm. But I realize his left ankle and his left toes, his differences, feeling differences, much freer than his right. And the left leg jiggles a little bit easier. So I start working with the left leg because that's the one that is got more in the brain map. So I'm stimulating the brain map by working with the toes, the feet, the soft and softening the knees perhaps, and getting that leg even freer. Okay, still no breathing. So I go up to his ribs and his chest, and it's a big muscle bound. You know, we've been doing a lot of weightlifting. So I'm putting my hands on those ribs, trying to suggest to those ribs that they could have some space in there, trying to suggest to the lower back where the diaphragm's connected that, oh, maybe we can work with that a little bit. So again, I'm not working with the shoulder. I'm working with the spine and everything that's connected to it. Then I come back to the legs again. And what was interesting was the left leg was cool, but the right ankle and the right toes were much freer. Never touched them. So now I go to the right foot, the right ankles, the right toes. They're so much nicer and more pliable. In fact, he had told me that he had sprained his ankle 10 years ago. So I thought, well, okay, that's always going to stay stiff. Well, it really let go very quickly because the nervous system, if it decides it wants to do something different, it will. and it can go very quickly. So I work with the right leg. Okay, so now I've got two legs that are working. And I lift them both up and I see, do they connect to the pelvis? How do they connect to the pelvis? And if you can think of the legs being coming from here, as opposed to the hip joints, then if you take both legs and move them side to side, ideally it goes all the way up to here. It doesn't stop at the lower back or anything like that. So, but his stopped at the hip joint. So there wasn't much I could do. There was a little bit of movement in the pelvis, but not really, because he is one oak tree here. He's not a palm tree, as I call it. So it was an oak tree. So an oak trunk. So how do I chisel away and make that more pliable? So I go to the left shoulder because that was cooperative, even though it was up here versus this one down here. But part of this one down here was because his ribs were tight on this side. Okay, so these ribs were tight and these ribs were open. Why? I'm curious. I don't have an answer. Doesn't matter. So I support these ribs as I open these ribs. Not what we did last time. And then I start to see, well, what happens in this arm? If I bring the elbow up, can I feel that joint moving in the shoulder blade? Can I help him feel that shoulder blade on the floor, on the table, sorry? And how far up can I bring this arm when he's prone? On his back, right? And so, okay, that felt good. That felt easy. I brought it down. What was interesting was what Dwayne had said, standing behind and feeling the two different shoulders. I didn't do that because I didn't really want to touch his right shoulder. But what happened after I brought this left arm up was this shoulder became much more pliable. So this area, this pec area, became much more pliable for this to move and to move back. So now he's got more movement here, and these ribs that were very open over here started to quiet. And the rib cage is like an accordion. If this shortens, this opens. So this is shortening now. So what's happening on this side? It's beginning to open. So I come over to this side and I support the ribs. Still don't touch the shoulder. Still don't touch the arm. So I support these ribs on this side. And then I start to what we call differentiate the ribs, which was to see if a few ribs would come this way while the other ribs go that way, so that we can feel these ribs more. Okay, that started to open up. This starts to close. We're getting a different balance now. Does it work in the pelvis and the legs as well? So I go back to the ribs on both sides. I go back to the spine underneath. So I'm going from underneath and feeling the spine. Not so much trying to massage the muscles to quiet them, but to just feel the spine and see how it's connected to his legs, because his pelvis wasn't moving. So I didn't want to go there either. So I went back down to his legs and his feet, and then there was a little bit more sway in the pelvis. Okay, good. So here we go. We've got the legs. He's got a left arm. He's got now ribs on either side. So I go back to his neck and start to see, okay, what's happening here? And not only the neck, but then I go down a little bit deeper to T3, T4, however far my hands can go. And again, start to bring attention to that area. And his neck had soreness in it, what I call soreness in it. So there was a little bit of soft tissue tenderness. There was a lot of that. But again, with your hands that are observing, you feel that. It's a very subtle difference, but you can feel that. And so I work and I start to help him feel his bones so that that tissue doesn't have to feel like it's overworking or it doesn't know where it goes or whatever. So then I go to his right arm. Okay, it is heavy. It is guarded still. And yet I take his hands and I start to work with the fingers. And I start to see, what can I get here? I start to rotate the forearm. And with rotating the forearm, I'm disrupting this bicep that really wants to protect him, right? He doesn't want to let go of this bicep. I can't straighten his elbow. There's no way. So I start to rotate and I bring the arm in and I bring the arm out, and he starts to say there's a little tenderness here. So I say, okay. So I let it go. I go back to his left arm and I start to bring his left arm up again a little bit higher, because again, we want to get the image of action into a good image of action. We get it in from the left arm and it transfers because we have the corpus callosum, right? So we've got that. So we're working with the left arm, which is the better arm, and it's sending messages to the brain that this is possible. I bring it back. I bring the right arm in as opposed to trying to do it. So I bend it like this. So it's only from the elbow that I'm bringing it. And I start to explore what is easy. Can he do this easy? I start to put my hands underneath the shoulder blade to start to help him feel that. And then I bring it back down. Okay. And that was all okay. No, guarding, no confusion there. And so then I go back to his legs. I bend his legs a little bit. And I start to go back to his ribs. And what he found was his right arm totally relaxed. He felt it. He says, look at that. Okay. So I go back to his neck and I start to support that. And at that point, I say, okay, the lesson's over. We roll him over, help him feel his skeleton sitting again. Okay. After he's sitting, then I have him stand. And then at the end, I asked him to reach. And so he's reaching. But then I asked him to use his leg to reach, because if you're reaching for the top part of the cupboard there, you're going to do more than just the arm. You're going to get the foot underneath it. And he goes, whoa. He reached with his left arm. And then he did it with his right. And there was no discomfort. There was all okay. And so then he did it with his left again. And then he did it with his right. And he goes, wow, look at that. So then when he was writing a check, what does he do? He bends at his ribs again. That's a pattern. Now, how do we ultimately start to see him choose another one? That's all part of the patience, and that's all part of the process. So I have him with a new experience, an experience of how he can reach with both arms easily, getting support from the lower back. And then and then it's up to him to start to play with these new possibilities. And we'll see over time. If he decides to come back, we'll continue to work and help support this right side from collapsing so that he can continue to feel more balanced, especially he's a singer. So therefore, sensory experience was good for him. The other thing that was very interesting was when he came in, his right eye was like bugged right out of his, so he get his right eye, right shoulder, right side of the ribs collapsed. Okay, so there's something going on there, right? But at the end, his right eye was softer. Everything was working at a better pace, at a better way, in a better way. So it was, as they say, that's how I work. indirectly, but always noticing where the problem area is. And then watching how the rest of it, when the rest of it opens up, most of the work is being done for you. You don't have to go in and work. And plus, if he's guarded, isn't it easier to quiet the pain by not testing his guardedness? So testing the guardedness is always, to me, an interesting issue. And so I asked him not to test it, even though he reached, but he felt so good about it. But I said, now don't overdo. Don't overdo. So if you feel better, you do less.